Jared Goff had himself a year this past season as he finished 10th in expected points added and 16th in success rate, which shows that he wasn't the most consistent quarterback on a play by play basis, but in the times he was having successful plays, they were getting a ton of yards. So that's an ode to having good coaching in Detroit, but that's also a sign that Goff was helping his cause. And speaking of helping their cause, the offensive line wasn't really doing that for Goff because they finished 21st in pass blocking according to PFF grades and 9th in run blocking. So they definitely had proficiency in the running game, but they weren't really helping Goff out as far as protection goes. And as far as what we can project for this upcoming season, they made a slight upgrade on the offensive line with Graham Glasgow being better than Evan Brown, but that's a marginal upgrade. It's not really a earth-shattering move. Looking at their talent, though, they should be better than they were last year because Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell is a top 5 or so offensive tackle duo. Frank Ragnow is a top 5 center. And then Jonah Jackson is kind of the heartbeat of this line from this past season because he's not a good pass protector, but he can run block pretty well. So they do have a ton of talent, and I think they're going to be better than they were this past season just because they should be gelling better. They have another year of playing together, and I think the talent's just really going to show through this year. One thing the Lions really have working in their favor is they have a lot of talent in the receiving ranks, and it's a cohesive unit as well. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the leader right now, and he is, in my opinion, the second best slot receiver in the NFL. He can do some of his work outside as well, but I think he is right there behind Cooper Kupp for receivers that are primarily slot options. And St. Brown, he was 70th in yards per reception, so just not giving you a deep downfield threat, which is missed now more than ever before because we've realized just how efficient the deep downfield passing game is. But he is 14th in yards per game, so he's still finding a way to be successful. And they sort of have the antithesis of a player in Josh Reynolds, who is more of a sporadic, deep downfield receiving option that's not going to be as consistent on a game-by-game basis. So they have a nice clash of styles there. They also have Jamison Williams, who at his best could be the best receiver out of all of these Lions players because he was a top 10 talent from the 2022 draft that was only kind of taking a bit of a fall in the draft because of an injury. And now he's going to be suspended for 6 games due to a gambling suspension, which is kind of whack. He wasn't betting on professional games, but I'm not going to get into that. Still, they have 3 good receivers right there. Then they have a good tight end option in Sam Laporta, who was overdrafted in the second round, but has some of the best run after catch you'll ever see for a tight end. So really nice compliment there. Just another dynamic for the offense. And another dynamic still is at running back, where Jahmyr Gibbs was also overdrafted. He was one of the worst picks of the first round in my eyes, but he is super talented as a receiving option in the backfield. He can even do some work as an additional slot. So you'll have your hands full covering Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs in the slot if you're a defensive coordinator, because Gibbs can run legit routes, and he's complemented nicely with David Montgomery as their second running back because Gibbs is just undersized and is not super physical as a player, and Montgomery thrives in the physicality of this game. He is a super strong power back that is not very fast, so he is just going to be the total inverse of Gibbs. There's, again, that nice sort of clash of styles. So the receiving options for the Lions is really solid. Their skill positions on the defensive side of the ball are also very solid. At least they should be. It's hard to project because it's basically an entirely new cornerback room, but all of the defensive backs project to be at least average, and most of them are going to be above average, as you can go one by one with their additions and see that they have been good on their previous teams. And it's reasonable then to expect that they can bring that successful play to the Lions as well. In the case of Cam Sutton, it's a little bit wonky. He was a nickel corner for Pittsburgh, and he's now going to be tasked with being an outside corner. And that's sort of a theme for the Lions. They have a lot of guys that can play nickel. They have CJ Gardner-Johnson as well. They have Ryan Branch, who they just drafted, was one of the best picks of the draft in my eyes. So they have a ton of talented players that are capable of playing the nickel position, which is really not a bad thing. You would rather have too many guys that can play there than not enough. But it will be interesting to see how everybody does not being able to play in that exact role, because there's just not enough bodies to go around there. There is so much talent, though, even on the outside. Emmanuel Mosley has been a really solid corner in years past. Kirby Joseph had a really solid rookie year as a safety. And really, there's going to be good players that don't even play. Tracy Walker and Will Harris are both solid players, and they're on the outside looking in for this team. So they have 7 legitimate defensive backs that are worthy of playing in the NFL. And again, that's a lot of bodies for not a lot of positions. There will be times where I think they could have all 7 players out there if it's like a 3rd and 20 situation where that the other team is going to pass. But that is pretty much it. For the most part, it's going to be just rotating those guys in and out, and it's not going to be too much of a drop-off because, again, even the guys that aren't playing are solid players that are worthy of it. Believe it or not, their defensive line also has a ton of promise associated with it as well, because Aiden Hutchinson, the steal of last year's draft, even though he went super high still, he should have gone number 1 in my eyes, because he has the elite athleticism you look for in an edge rusher, but he also has a ton of talent and has produced at a college level, whereas Trayvon Walker just has the athletic profile. So Hutchinson was a gift from the heavens for the Lions. He had an awesome year as a rookie. He was 30th in pressures and was really good in the run game as well. I like, too, he does have the size to play inside on passing situations, so it's nice versatility he offers as well. The Lions really didn't opt for that much at all last year, but that's something they have in their back pockets. And he has a running mate this year as well, as Charles Harris missed almost all of last year to injury, but he was 28th in pressures the year before, which is when he most recently was healthy. So that's a really good edge duo right there. On the inside, Lee McNeil is a very solid interior rusher, and he can do some stuff as a run defender. He's not great in that regard. John Kaminsky, he's a huge 285-pound edge. That's a solid rotational guy. They also have Isaiah Buggs and Benito Jones, who are replacement-level defensive tackles, but they're sort of glue guys. You need those types of players on your team, even if they're not going to be exceptional. They're going to give you NFL-caliber snaps. Josh Pascal was really rough as a rookie, so if he plays less snaps this year, that's probably going to be for the better of the Lions this season. But you also would like to see him make some strides and develop. And the best way he's going to be able to develop is through getting snaps in games. So there is hope that he can be a contributor this year. And he was drafted pretty highly this past draft. He was a early second rounder. So there is still hope for him. It's just, it wasn't very optimistic based on his performance this past season. And lastly, they have the Okwara brothers, who are both solid enough edge rushers. They're not world beaters, but I would say they're average to above average when they're at their best. And that finishes out their edge room. On the inside, they have Levi Unruzurike, who is definitely somebody with a ton of promise. He's a really good athlete. He was drafted also early in the second round in 2021. He has not played so far, but he is still somebody that is primed for something in the NFL, I would say. And right now he hasn't shown anything. So anything they get from him is going to be found money. To wrap up the positional groups, you might be surprised to hear this, but the Lions reached on another player in Jack Campbell, who was expected to go in the second round. They drafted him in the middle of the first round. He is somebody with a ton of promise. He was arguably the best linebacker in this class, so at least they got something of merit in him, but he was just not expected to go nearly as high as he went. There was a debate between Drew Sanders and Jack Campbell. It was sort of a issue of what you need the players to do. Jack Campbell is more well-rounded. Sanders is more of a blitzer. So Campbell is a solid player. He just, like a lot of these picks for the Lions, was kind of overdrafted. But even with that said, he is going to probably be the anchor for their linebacking core. If it's not him, it's definitely going to be Alex Anzalone, who has been solid throughout his career. They have a ton of depth at the linebacker position, which is really not a position that you historically need depth at, but Malcolm Rodriguez and Derek Barnes are both average or so. So if somebody goes down, and you never like to see that, but if somebody does get injured for the Lions at linebacker, they're going to have a good enough replacement in there that you really shouldn't notice too much of a drop-off. So it's solid. They're all projected to be good run defenders and pretty poor in coverage, but Jack Campbell definitely has the potential to be a solid cover linebacker. He has the athleticism for it, and he is a very smart player, so he definitely has some things going for him. And Anzalone has never really been a complete issue in that regard. He's been good to a little bit below average in that regard, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue, especially with, again, how good their defensive backs are. They're going to minimize the issues the linebackers have. And lastly, for coaching, the Lions have the offensive side of things on complete lock because Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, is one of the hot commodities in the NFL. He is primed for a head coaching position in no time. He has been instrumental in the revival of Jared Goff's career, and he really just knows how to generate plays that are going to attack the biggest weaknesses in any defense he plays. That is, unless you're going against the Patriots without Amon-Ra St. Brown, that's going to be a different situation. But basically, the Lions had success offensively against everybody, and it was in large part a schematic thing. Dan Campbell is also a pretty good offensive mind in his own regard, so they have some nice things moving forward. I'm not too familiar with their defensive coordinator. I honestly don't know a whole lot about his schematic system, so I'm not going to bullcrap you in that regard. But the offensive side of things are definitely great positives for the Lions, and that's going to be something they can hang their hat on for the time being, at least, until Ben Johnson ultimately becomes a head coach somewhere else. A very tangible thing they do offensively, too, that really helps Goff and the rest of the offense is they ran the fourth most play action attempts out of anybody in the league last year. And if you've watched my videos for a while, you'll know that I'm a big advocate for play action. It just makes the quarterback's job easier because it forces the defense to play the run first and then the pass. And again, they're running at an extremely high clip. They were fourth, and they were close to being third as well. So they are doing that at a high propensity, and they're having a lot of effectiveness with it as well. In all, I think the Lions have a really solid team that is not any more rough around the edges. They have historically been a team that may have some star talent and then just have deficiencies surrounding it, but they have just about everything you would look for, and that includes the backup quarterback position, so there's no worries, or there's at least minimal worries. If Goff goes down, I think Bridgewater is more than competent as a backup, so he can come in. They have receiving options. They have everything on offense, including the offensive line. It's just going to be a matter of the talent really gelling on that regard. Defensively, there's not too much to point fingers at. The defensive backs should be really good. The defensive line is more than good enough. The linebacking room, there's been a ton of investment there, and I would say it looks pretty good as well. As I was saying too, coaching is good for them. There is a lot to like about this Lions team, and I have them clearly as being deserving of a playoff spot, not just going to sneak into the playoffs because the NFC and NFC North are weak. I think they're good enough to earn their way into the playoffs because this team is legit. There's a ton of talent there. The only thing that I'm a little bit hesitant with is how sustainable is Jared Goff. He really had a very solid year this past season where he was at a minimum an above average quarterback, and he was in that top 10 conversation. I think, honestly, the supporting cast is good enough that he should be able to stick there, but I am a little bit hesitant just because when the supporting cast hasn't been as good, Jared Goff has looked really rough at times. And if there's an injury to a receiver, they don't have a ton of depth there. So, Lord forbid, if Amon-Ra St. Brown were to get hurt, that would really be catastrophic for them. But I think the surrounding cast is good enough that Goff should continue to look good. And again, this team is definitely a playoff worthy team.